Resiliency Within, with host Elaine Miller-Karras, is brought to you by Trauma Resource Institute, Incorporated. Visit traumaresourceinstitute.com.
Welcome to Resiliency Within, featuring your host, Elaine Miller-Karras. In unprecedented times, our beliefs and well-being are put to the test. When we take the things we've learned in life and look at challenges in a whole new way, we learn to develop resiliency, which can then be used to promote healing and personal strength. Now, here is Elaine Miller-Karras.
Welcome to Resiliency Within. I am delighted today to have two very dear friends and colleagues on the show, Dr. Lindy Grabbe and Dr. Ingrid Duva. I'm going to say a little bit about both of them in just a minute, but I also want to just kind of acknowledge them. They have been such leading researchers regarding our community resiliency model. I think many of you know that our regular listeners that we are sponsored by the Trauma Resource Institute, and you can learn more about the Trauma Resource Institute by going to traumaresourceinstitute.com. But one of the things that's important when we have innovations that have to do with mind-body health is that we have wonderful academics that go, hey, that could be a good idea. Let's research this. So this is what they've done. And today they're going to talk about something very dear to their heart. But let me tell you a little bit about, we're entitling this show, like really from trauma to transformation, healing young lives, the science of resilience and juvenile justice. So what happens when we teach resilience as a pathway to healing for incarcerated youth? So both of them, Dr. Ingrid Duva and Dr. Lindy Grabbe, share their findings today from the research on the Community Resiliency Model with the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. Now, this research was, and this project was conducted in partnership with the Georgia Preparatory Academy and the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. So this, and they're going to talk in detail about this, about how the study explored how this innovative program in introducing body-based resilience skills helps young people better regulate anger, increase emotional awareness, and promote healthier ways of responding to stress and adversity. But one of the things that I love about both of them is beyond the promising research, they have shared such incredibly wonderful stories about the young people embracing skills and learning about themselves and empowering them. And I know they're going to share a couple of the stories, and of course, being very careful about confidentiality as they do that. But let me say a little bit about Dr. Ingrid Duva first. She has her PhD. She has her master's in nursing. She's an RN. She's an associate professor of nursing at Emory University and a certified community resiliency model teacher. Dr. Duva earned her BSN at the University of Florida and her MN and PhD at Emory University. She completed an advanced interprofessional fellowship in healthcare improvement through the Veterans Administration Quality Scholars Program, where she now serves as faculty for the Atlanta site. She has really a diverse clinical background in nursing, school health, ambulatory care, and broader healthcare leadership experience in strategy, compliance, and operations. So there's so much more I could say, but for time's sake and to hear from her directly, I'm going to stop right there. But let me go next to Dr. Lindy Grabbe. And so Dr. Grabbe, well, what do I say about you, Lindy? You've done so much, but you're now a professor emerita from Emory University. And I always and say a little bit about you because you've retired from there, but I don't think you're retired because you do so much with the community resiliency model and more things in the world, but you've had a very distinguished career. You've specialized in primary care and mental health services. You are not only a family nurse practitioner, you're a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And you've really focused a lot of your work on underserved women and youth and has been an advocate for integrating biology-based resilience practices into healthcare and community settings. Her published research has examined the impact of CRIM training with youth and involved in the juvenile justice system, but even beyond that, in healthcare with nurses, with people who have substance abuse conditions. She's done so much in the arena for public health. There's so much more to say, but I think I'll say that for now. And want to turn it over to you two to start talking. So welcome, Ingrid and Lindy. As we get started today, I'm going to ask you just a simple question. What's on your mind as we get started? And I'll start with you, Lindy, and then I'll go to Ingrid, and then I know Ingrid's going to go into the presentation, the more formal presentation.
Well, I think the most important thing is how to disseminate our findings because we taught around 600 youth and they only got an hour of CRIM. And CRIM is a very inexpensive intervention. And there are over 600,000 kids who are processed in juvenile justice throughout the United States. They need CRIM. CRIM is an emotion regulation intervention that can be taught quickly, and they deserve it. And these are mostly, I mean, they're all good kids, and any tools that we can give them where they can maintain their cool and so that they can deal with bullies or corrections officers who may be, a little mean to them, which isn't common, but it happens. And so I think the impact of what we're doing, as you'll see, shows that CRIM helps these kids. And so we've got to get the word out. And Ingrid and I are working on a manuscript right now. So we're hoping to get that published soon.
Great. And so I just want people to know too that when we talk about CRIM, we're talking about the Community Resiliency Model. It's just easier to say CRIM as we go through today's podcast. Yes, yes. And so Ingrid, so over to you. What's on your mind as we're getting started?
Well, I was thinking about what an honor it is to be on the podcast. I listened to several episodes yesterday because I had to drive home from Florida, and it's a long drive.
No.
And I'm an avid listener of the podcast. So what's on my mind is I'm excited that you've given us this opportunity to disseminate our research findings, in that you have the structure. So you're giving us a voice to share what we've done. And that's super helpful to us. And then Lindy, of course, reminded me that what should be on our minds, or my mind, is revising the manuscript that we have that we would like to get published. That's a little harder to sit down and do. It's more fun to be here with you. Thank you.
Well, and as we're going to get started, and Ingrid is actually going to bring up some slides. So for our Voice America listeners, of course, you can't see the slides, but because we now have this wonderful new way that we're doing things with Voice America, we have a YouTube channel. And so that YouTube channel will, if you go to, you will be able to see, and you'll be able to see the slides, but they'll really also make sure that when they're talking about the information on the slide, that they will talk about it for those of you that are listening and can't see the slides. So Ingrid, over to you. Let's get started.
Okay, great. I'm pulling up my slides. Nope. And then it seems like you're not seeing the right thing. Are you?
Yeah, we're seeing the slides now, but
Okay,
we're just,
fabulous.
but you might want to put it in the presenter view so that we can see them in their larger form.
How's that?
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so wonderful. So I will present this slide set, or go through these slides and share some information. And Lindy and Elaine, I hope that you interrupt me. Sometimes I get carried away. I love to talk about the Community Resiliency Model. And this is just our intro slide. We taught the Community Resiliency Model. This is for incarcerated youth, which you've already introduced. On this slide, we have a symbol of CRIM Georgia, which is a small nonprofit that we run in Georgia, really to help organize and spread the community resiliency model throughout the state. And I just have that front and center because some of the funding for this project and a lot of the manpower came from our small nonprofit. It's what made it possible. That, and obviously having the model from the Trauma Resource Institute to use. So this specific research was done around training that was funded by the America Cares Grant, and it was funded through 2022 to 2024. And then I mentioned that we partly funded it for manpower. But we did receive this funding from the Department of Juvenile Justice here in Georgia, asking us to teach the community resiliency model because they already had members of their staff and community who were interested in having this available to their youth. So, and then we conducted, of course, we've already mentioned that Lindy and I are part of Emory University. So it was a collaboration between Emory University School of Nursing and the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice.
And Ingrid, can I just say, because we're going to acknowledge other as well, but I want to especially acknowledge Doug Jackson because he was, worked there for so many years. I know he's retired now, but he was such a moving force. I remember meeting him over 10 years ago when he had some vision along with Lindy about these ideas. And then of course, Dr. Rufus Johnson as well from the Department of Juvenile Justice that actually has been a great collaborator and advocate for the program. And there's many more that we'll talk about, but I wanted to especially acknowledge the two of them.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because Rufus Johnson was instrumental in getting all of these trainings scheduled, and Doug Jackson helped with that too, as well as helped us teach when we took the model to the youth. So on this next slide, I'd just like to give a little bit of background about our youth in the juvenile justice system. We recognize that these are youth who are at risk, in particular for concerns that we have about violence because their exposure to violence before being incarcerated and then while being incarcerated, we know that, and their exposure to trauma is higher than for the rest of the population of youth. And that early life adversity is associated with lifelong social and health problems. So this is one reason why, from a nursing perspective, Lindy and I are so interested in this population. This on this slide is a picture of the state of Georgia. So hello, Peach State. We're fairly large in geography, but what's really interesting about our state is how many different counties we have in our state. It's over 150, I think. Lindy, do you remember the exact number of counties in Georgia?
159.
And we have been on a mission since COVID to really get the community resiliency model out to all of these counties. But on this slide, it just shows you where the regional youth detention centers are as part of the DJJ in the state, and then the longer term youth detention centers, and it gives the bed capacity. So it's just to give viewers who can see the slide an idea of where are these youth in our state. And then you mentioned the Georgia Preparatory Academy. So unlike the rest of the public school system in Georgia, which is, run by county or governed by the county, Georgia Preparatory Academy is its own sort of district, and it crosses over the counties. So making it a little bit unique in that aspect as well. And so we relied on this Georgia Preparatory Academy because these CRIM classes became a part of their health curriculum. All right, so for our purposes, we were doing research. So we wanted to study the training and the effect, first of all, the implementation of the training and the feasibility of it, but the effect that it has on this youth, because we want to, see if our beliefs hold true when we actually provide this opportunity for the youth, what we know they're capable of. So the intervention was the community resiliency model itself. And we know that community resiliency model is trauma responsive. Most people who listen to this podcast probably know, as you mentioned, that it's from the Trauma Resource Institute. Thank you. And that it's rooted in science, right? So the message that we want to get across is that our neurons are malleable and the brain can change. And that's what makes this possible to make a difference for the youth. We have a growing evidence base. We've been shared on some publications, which is great. We've done research. We've been in contact with people across the country who are using the community resiliency model for research opportunities, either as part of their education and training or just special interest populations. And so it's great to see the efforts there. And we've actually done the highest level of research with the community resiliency model, which is a randomized controlled trial, which means that we have a comparison group. And I bring that up because this study, we didn't have a comparison group. This is a little bit more of a practical approach. But we have that in the history of our research with CRIM. But really what this intervention is accessible self-care, and it has emotional regulation benefits. And that's why we think it's so appropriate for this population. We really want to target helping the youth be in control of their own reactions, their own bodies. And it's so accessible that we wanted to test and see, can we, with a short period of time, introduce this model and get some uptake and some effect? So the facility partnership was critical. You mentioned Rufus Johnson's name. He was key for us getting the classes, scheduling the classes and coordinating with the principals and the teachers. But before we even got there, we had to get background checks. We had to be approved to actually come in the facilities. So a few more steps there with the screenings for those of us who were the Community Resiliency Model teachers. We got the DJJ teachers on board with us to help us implement not just the trainings and scheduling them and help facilitate that, but help us collect data for our research study. That was very important aspect for us, and great appreciation goes out to those teachers. They were already working hard, and we gave them one more thing to do. But the principals and the staff ensured classroom fit. Was the day of the week correct? The time of day, was this going to be a time that the youth were accessible to us and ready to learn, and that it fit into their curriculum? Because they have obviously a lot more things to do with the youth during the school day than accommodate us, but they did, and it was fantastic. And I'll tell you the bulk of the work, and hats off to Lindy Grabbe, who's here. The consent, assent, and youth advocacy is a tremendous piece of our role as researchers to make sure that the youth who did participate, not so much in the education itself, because that became part of the curriculum, but they did need to be aware, and their parents and guardians needed to be aware that it was going to be offered in their curriculum, but that their participation in answering questions about the training was voluntary. And so if some of the youth that we approached were actually considered adults, right? And so they would sign their own consent. For the rest of the youth, if you're familiar with research, what we get is an assent. So we make sure that we explain to them, look, you're getting this training, but we would like to ask you some questions about it before and after, and it might be some questions about your emotions or your behaviors, so that can be sensitive. So we want to make sure that they buy in and they're doing this willingly. They're in, as detainees, they're a little bit vulnerable to feeling coerced, which of course we don't want them to feel. So it's the open opportunity to them. You're going to be going to participating in our class. Would you like to do our surveys? And alongside that, Lindy got in touch with only minimal help on my part. This is a huge role for her. All the guardians and the parents, and very few didn't have guardians or parents who were jumping on board willing to consent and say, yes, let my children participate, or let our youth participate. And for those who we couldn't reach someone, we did have DJJ staff or teachers give consent for the youth. So the implementation, it was during the academic year 2023-2024. Lindy mentioned we have between 500 and 600 youth. We had 52 sessions, I believe, and we had to already mention the security and background requirements for us, but we had to get our other teachers on board. And then there was two modes of delivery, whatever matched the school's need best. We could deliver this virtually, and if we did it virtually, we zoomed in, and there's a picture on this slide and it is from AI, full disclosure, because we don't take a lot of pictures in this environment, mocking up what the classroom was like, right? So you see bare walls in this picture. You see a teacher in the front of the classroom with their laptop, and you see a whiteboard. So we came in on Zoom on this whiteboard with the curriculum, which was teaching the community resiliency model. And the youth could view us and participate with the teacher facilitating Q&A, helping them do the skills. They would come up in front of the whiteboard or in front of the camera so we could see them and talk to them. And so anyway, that's what this is just sort of a mock-up of that classroom. It wasn't an actual DJJ picture. So if we did this virtually, such as in this classroom, we met with them on 2 sessions. If we were there in person, we captured them for an hour or just over. And so there were many locations, about half of them that we came in person and had 2 teachers there. So 25 of the different counties that we reached, which we felt like was remarkable. Let me advance my slide. Oops, there's our whiteboard. It was a very critical part of our implementation. And then on this slide, we have a gentleman who actually was some motivation for some projects that you have now with youth ambassador training. But this young man actually trained to be a community resiliency model teacher with me in 2019 when I became a teacher. And he had been the recipient of some sort of pilot crim teaching with youth at the Covenant House, which I know you've mentioned Todd Wilcher's name on this program before. So he was a very willing participant. He received some education as part of being homeless youth at the Covenant House, and then became certified to be a teacher. And we showed clips of him to the youth at the DJJ. We wanted to give them an opportunity to see that young people, buy into the model too, and are using and teaching the model. And that was appealing. We found that visually that we got some positive responses from the youth. And so we kept that as part of our training to show them. His name is Anthony. I don't think he'd mind me saying that. Okay, so the youth that we taught, we have this unique population, right? And in Georgia, because of our demographics, we had, and who we were reaching in this audience, about 80% of youth who are detained are Black and male, and the average age is 16. And the reason I bring that up is because when we do our research, we want to make sure that our research replicates that total population that we have in Georgia. And so one other thing I wanted to say about the JJ youth that we knew going in is that Dr. Grabbe had actually piloted teaching youth way back in 2016, a crim class, and had collected some information from these youth. And so we had an idea that it might help them with anger. And so when we developed our survey that we had these youth participate in before and after the training, we did ask them questions about anger. We also asked about well-being, which is a common in our research to talk to our participants about well-being before and after. We asked about 5 questions, what we call pro-sociality, so sort of their perception of others on a social basis. We asked them 4 questions about noticing, and we found that those questions best represented what we think the community resiliency model represents in terms of sensory awareness. We asked them about interoceptive awareness and self-kindness, and then fighting. We asked some questions about fighting.
And PTSD.
Yes. So I mentioned the general population of youth that are detained across the state of Georgia. And then here on this slide, I show you what our sample was. We didn't collect age. But we did collect, and we did not collect race because we were very sensitive to any identifiers, but we did collect gender. And so what we had really mirrored the population. We had 85% males and 15% females. And then this just shows you that we had about half and a half where we delivered crim in person versus virtually over the whiteboards. So what do we find? That's what's important about our research that we really want to share. This is just preliminary research or pilot level research, but still we were interested in their baseline scores. And so their WHO well-being for the sample that we had, their WHO well-being score was 14.24. And so when the range is between 11 and 18, generally for that scale, what it told us is that the kids' well-being wasn't poor, but it was close to poor. So the total mean score is 56%, and below 50% is suggested to be poor mental well-being. So they weren't in the poor category, but they were getting close to it. And then Lindy mentioned PTSD. The average score was baseline was 2.83. The range is 1 to 4. And so the scoring between 0 to 1 indicates low risk, 3 moderate, and 4 to 5 high. So they're pushing moderate risk for PTSD. So we feel like it's important to understand where they're at before we get started. And it also tells us how this sort of training really applies to the population. What did we find after the training that was of significance? So I mentioned all the different questions we asked. The ones that bubbled up for our sample as significant would be anger. We saw statistically significant decrease in the baseline anger score, which was 16 down to 15 afterward. And so I just show you that here. The possible range of scores is between 5 and 25. So these kids tell you where they're at, or mid to higher. So we feel like that's an important aspect of why we wanted to teach this population, was really to get at that anger. So that was meaningful to us. This slide is very busy. I'm not going to go through the entire slide. It will be a part of our manuscript, but what it shows you are the different scales that comprised our total survey. And again, the youth responded to these survey questions before the training and after the training. And then we looked at sort of matching scores and then tested for differences. And so this just gives those results. And I mentioned the significant results. We also found an unexpected finding with empathy, and we're going to be following up on this because maybe it's unexpected, or maybe when you understand awareness, it's not unexpected, but their empathy scores went in the reverse direction that we were hypothesizing. They went down instead of up after our training. And so our thought there is perhaps we're raising an awareness of these children or youth of sort of their perception of others, their feelings toward others, how they sense their emotions around what's happening and what's happened to them, perhaps. So we don't have enough information to say really more than that, but we do hope to follow up and learn more.
And you know what I'd like to do, Ingrid, we need to take a small break right now.
Sure.
So we'll bring down the slides for during the break, and we'll come back after the break, and we'll start with this next part of the presentation. So we'll be back to hear more of this incredible information that they have been sharing with us. That I think, as I'm listening to it, the implications for youth, not only in Georgia but for the world, is very important. And when I think about the anger scores, being so different, think about how many acts that may have gotten these young people into an incarcerated situation may have been as a result of the anger that they were experiencing. So I'd love to unpack that a little bit more when we get back from the break, as well as listen to the rest of the presentation. So we'll be back in just a moment, and we'll continue this discussion with Dr. Ingrid Duva and Dr. Lindy Grabbe.
The Trauma Resource Institute is a nonprofit organization cultivating trauma-informed and resiliency-focused individuals and communities worldwide. Our mission is to take people from despair to hope. We believe in a world where every child and adult has the capacity to recover from highly stressful and traumatic experiences. Check out iChill, our free app that helps you learn the wellness skills of the community and trauma resiliency models. Go to traumaresourceinstitute.com for more information.
Elaine Miller-Karras co-founded the Trauma Resource Institute, Incorporated. The Institute provides trainings on the models Elaine developed: the Community Resiliency Model, or CRM, and the Trauma Resiliency Model, or TRM. If you would like more information about the Trauma Resource Institute or how to participate in trainings, visit the Institute's website at traumaresourceinstitute.com. That's traumaresourceinstitute.com. Trauma Resource Institute. Build resilience, awaken hope.
This is Resiliency Within with Elaine Miller-Karras. To reach the show, you may send an email to elaine@resiliencywithin.com. Now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Ingrid Duva and Dr. Lindy Grabbe. They're talking about the really important research that they did with youth in the Department of Juvenile Justice in Georgia, bringing in the Community Resiliency Model. So the first part of the show, we heard from Dr. Duva about some of the findings, and she's going to continue telling us a little bit more about the findings, and then Dr. Lindy Grabbe will comment as well regarding the study and regarding their work there. So, Dr. Duva, if you'd like to continue. Oh, you're already there, so go ahead.
Yes, so I talked a lot about quantitative results from our surveys, and I'd be remiss not to talk about qualitative. First, we could talk all day about our experience and how wonderful it was to get to interact with the youth and how receptive the staff and the teachers were to the programming, which in itself is sort of reinforcing that this is feasible in that environment. But we also asked some open-ended questions on the survey after the training to see what the youth might provide, which is always interesting to ask an adolescent to answer a question open-ended. But we had some great responses, and I want to share a few of those that we felt were particularly meaningful. So when you think about beliefs and awarenesses about themselves, we kind of group some of the responses into that theme, but this is representative, and the youth says, and it's slightly paraphrased, but it's hard to control my anger. I get angry too easy. I'm hardworking and will take this serious. I'd be chilling, cooling, and be in my own little world. I need help.
Mm.
So, and then another sort of theme that bubbled up when we were looking at all the qualitative comments would be the youth gaining knowledge about their emotions. And so this is just a representative quote from one of the participants. How to control myself and emotions. This is when we asked what they had learned. How to control myself and emotions. How to calm myself down. A different way to control my anger. What my emotions are and how to control them, different ways to tell when you're not calm, and how to describe emotions. And I should clarify that that's amalgamation sort of several different comments from youth that fell under this sort of category of knowledge about their emotions. And if they've learned something, then we feel like we've accomplished what we set out for. So learning about their emotions, of course, can help them, learn to control them by using the skills of the model. So what we learned and what is next, just to briefly summarize, is that the youth expressed a desire to share the skills. What I can do to make others feel better. So, despite that quantitative empathy finding where we saw sort of the reverse of what we were expecting, where empathy seemed to go down in the scores after training, what they said on their surveys was, what can I do to make others feel better? So that's really meaningful. And I want to teach someone because I want them to learn how to control their emotions.
I would like to ask you something, Ingrid, and please, Lindy, you might want to answer this too. To me, that's curious that was something that they said when there was when the empathy scores, because that certainly sounds like empathy. I'm wondering if there was a different way that the question was phrased in the survey versus asking them in an open-ended way that actually does demonstrate an empathic stance towards others.
I would just briefly say that, well, we have a lot to learn, to understand, we haven't had a chance to go down that road of really understanding their perception of the questions, and getting to test it out on larger samples would be helpful. But the second half of this quote, I want to teach someone because I want them to learn how to control their emotions. The beginning of the slideshow, we reminded ourselves that these youth have been exposed to a lot of trauma and violence. And so perhaps there's processing a little bit more awareness around what has happened to them and what kind of environment they'd like to go back to. I also bring that up because I think Lindy will mention, when we got in touch with their guardians and their families, they were very eager for their youth to learn how to control their emotions. But we also know when these youth leave the facility, they're going back to their communities. So we want them to have some skills to navigate violence, trauma, difficulty, because they're not always going back to an environment that's clear of that. It was there when before they left and then they go back. And so perhaps they're having some angst about what they've had to be exposed to. We don't know.
Thank you.
And I would just say that I think with CRIM, simple as it is, it's somatic skills. So they're developing body awareness. And I think that's neuroplasticity. So I think they're developing a self-awareness, which is pretty unusual in 15, 16, 17-year-olds.
Yes.
So I think there's a self-focus that's unusual at that age. And that's perhaps, we'll see what the explanation is. We're definitely going to dig deeper into it.
Yeah. Thank you, Lindy. All right, Ingrid, continue.
Yes, and then another important thing that we took away from this study is that we had 20 of the participants who wrote in on their survey that they had already shared what they had learned with their peers, their family, and their friends. And so we were super excited about that because when you know from teaching the community resiliency model that once you've learned it, we want you to be a guide. We want others to benefit. And I always say to Lindy, I said, it has an exponential effect. It's not just the person you teach, it's the people around them. And
It expands it, right? Yes.
So great to see that, they are doing that, and telling us about it. So also for us, I've already mentioned this, but our future plans are, in addition to looking at this empathy finding, which is very interesting and in contrast to pro-sociality findings that we've had in the past, how can CRIM help these at-risk youth when they go back into the community? For all the reasons I mentioned. And then, the big, hairy umbrella goal for reaching this population is, can we meet our goal to reduce violence for this population? That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ingrid. And I just want to mention right here before I turn it over to Lindy, is that we've heard, and Lindy and I, gosh, this was before the pandemic, thought about what can we do to create a program for youth. And then, of course, after seeing and hearing the work that you're all doing there, that we at TRI have created the Youth Ambassador Program. And we're very proud to say that we've had 2 cohorts already that have been our youth program has been brought to Georgia, to the Juvenile Justice Center. And we have trained a cohort of young men and young women now. And I am going to turn it over to Lindy because there's also some people that she wants to acknowledge, that we all want to acknowledge, who have been our community resiliency model teachers who have brought this in the Youth Ambassador Program, and also helped you all do your presentation. So Lindy, over to you.
Okay. So first of all, for this work that Ingrid's been discussing, I want to recognize Doug Jackson, Todd Wilcher, Bonnie Hardage, Barbara Gibson, Chrissy Rule, Ellen McCarty, and then, of course, Ingrid and I taught in the facilities. And also Regina Rashid and Rika Jones were involved. These people were so committed, they're so enthusiastic, they saw these youth for who they are, which is, they're very precious, special, they're good kids. And then I want to say thank you, Elaine, for making this possible. This is such an important program because there are 6,000 youth who come through the Georgia system, and DJJ here in Georgia is wonderful. I think, unfortunately, these kids may be incarcerated for months, years even, but while they're there, I think they get good care. The people that we were researching, the youth are doubly vulnerable. Not only are they incarcerated, they are children. And so we took every precaution to protect them. And then I want to say a few things. I we thought it would be very hard to reach the parents. And so I was able to get their cell phone numbers and I texted them to get their permission to get the surveys. To my great surprise, they answered immediately and enthusiastically, giving their permission. Only two parents refused out of 600 plus, probably. It took a year to gather all this data. And we were not funded to do the research. This was done out of love. We had a lot of challenges. I want to put that up front for other states that will replicate this research. Very often we would be scheduled to give a class and there would be lockdown or perhaps a riot or some such thing that would happen and we couldn't teach the class. Also want to mention something important. We did communicate with the parents, and when I had an email, we shared with them a YouTube playlist of CRIM, which we put together, and we had 200 hits on that. So the parents were able to learn the skills themselves. And not that the kids weren't themselves teaching the parents the skills, because we knew they were, and because the skills are easily explained. So that's exciting. These kids get discharged, they go back to their communities. So that's also something that we need to take advantage of. In their, that's a whole program in itself. And we do have some liaison here in Georgia for a separate program where we can take advantage of that. But the community resiliency model is elegantly simple. It can become a common language for families to talk about when you get outside your resilient zone. Dad's, on the edge of this resilient zone. Let's notice the texture of the dining room table or something. Also, I want to talk about the fact that 80% of the population was Black, because that is probably true in many, many states, and that's not right. Okay, and there's a lot of data on the internet, if you look at that, and there's many organizations that look at this, and it shouldn't be this way. So whatever we can do to give youth skills so that they can not just be in charge of their own emotions so they don't get into violent situations, but so that through a program like the Youth Ambassador Program, so that they can help each other and so that they can not get into violent situations, so that they get incarcerated is good. These youth were very empowered by CRIM. We even had 10-year-old who wanted to become a youth ambassador. So what we're doing here is very exciting. As the youth are discharged, there's potential, if we could get funding, to work with them in their communities across the state, 159 different communities in Georgia. So the implications here for working with youth are enormous. I guess that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Well, and I think one of the things I want to add, to piggyback on what you said in terms of, is there's something wrong, right? When 80% of the kids are Black. And I want you all to know that are listening, we have some amazing Black community resiliency model teachers that have been very passionately involved in this project, not only in what the two of you started there and bringing in, people like Todd Wilcher and Regina, the people that you mentioned, but I also wanted to kind of do a shout out to our Youth Ambassador Program. One of our staff, Kevin McLeod, has been very involved with it, and he has a really strong really commitment to Black youth everywhere, as well as Shakayla Johnson, as well as Adrian Acosta. So I think that is also something that I really want to underscore. And there is a show that we did on Voice America, Kevin did, where he talked about the Youth Ambassador Program and its importance. So thank you for bringing that, into the discussion, Lindy, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I want to also give a shout out to Resilient Georgia, which has, been an incredible support for the community resiliency model, and Cami Wolf Rice, and she has some opioid funding. And her youth prevention network, which is across the state, is going to dovetail very well as we see youth discharged from the juvenile justice system. If these youth can be paired with some of her folks, because it makes all the sense in the world to combine addiction prevention with emotion regulation, of course, and so that if we can work with that group of folks, it would just work really, really well.
Well, and I believe, Lindy, you told me about a young man who had finished the Youth Ambassador Program that had been released, and he's in rural Georgia, and he is a really strong advocate of wanting to share these skills. Can and if our audio listeners could see, Lindy has a big smile on her face right now. So could you say a little bit
Well,
about him?
he could be our poster child. I'm having a little. I need help. We need some funding to have help to get this done, because I need to be in touch with probation officers when the youth leave the system. But this is a young man he's a very, very good crim teacher. I know we don't call them teachers, but he is a youth ambassador. He is done with that program. He's been discharged. He's in a rural county, and he's close to two of the detention centers, so he could go there, and teach a few hundred kids in those settings. And I can pair him with Todd Wilcher, who would be willing to go, but I need funds, or I need to get him to work with Cammie's folks on the Youth Prevention Network. But I've got to have, we need help and research assistance. Now, I want to say that we are definitely entering phase two. Todd Wilcher and Regina Rashid have been working for a year with the youth who were in the first phase of the app program. And thank you to Try for piloting that program here in Atlanta, where the youth were trained as ambassadors. And they learned how to train their peers as in crim skills and concepts. So the potential for them to teach their peers and the staff is enormous. So now it's been replicated down in the Macon facility. And I want to recognize Andrea Stinson Miller, I'm getting her name wrong, and Amanda, who are heading up that program down in Macon.
And these are also two crim teachers, and I know
They
I
are.
first met them through Resilient Georgia because they've been working very closely with that. So
Right.
I hope that people are hearing that there's a network, and I think this is the important thing. What starts to change is when you have people that are committed and they know something that's simple that's very shareable. Because we had to have all those crim teachers first, and then the crim teachers then saw that there was a need. And then I would say, Ingrid and Lindy, you are such public health and community minded individuals that saw the need and then started talking about it and bringing people in. And I remember Lindy, and I've interviewed Todd Wilcher on the show when he was with Covenant House, but I remember him saying how important it was to the youth that were coming to the Covenant House, many of them who were transitioning out of foster care, that would say, after they learned about the biology of the human nervous system, they'd say to Todd, "You mean I'm not broken?" And he'd say, no, you're not broken. You had something happen to you, a series of things that happened to you that affected your nervous system, and that can affect our behavior. It can affect our thoughts. But let's talk about what else is true and how you can maybe change your life. And you mentioned, right, neuroplasticity, and that things can change. And when I see those anger scores, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because I'm thinking, how can if we could get this in the hands of all people everywhere, not only youth, how could that possibly, affect our families, our community, our counties, our state? I mean, it has a far-reaching effect. And I think that's what I've seen in the research that you both have done is you're quantifying certainly ideas that I've had, but you've actually given the data behind that it's really important. And this is what we're finding. And I guess when I want to personally do a shout out to both of you in giving us that, evidence. And even though it wasn't a randomized controlled trial, it's a pretty impactful survey that you've done in terms of what the young people said afterwards. So I don't know if either of you have any comments about what I just said, but I hope you do.
Well, I want to say that we had already published two studies, which were randomized control studies from Emory University with healthcare workers. Now, those circumstances were much more easy to control, but they were under very difficult circumstances. One was during the worst phase of COVID. Very powerful results regarding secondary traumatic stress, which was very significant, and two, well-being. So very strong results, and then this increased sense of teamwork, which was remarkable. So CRIM does something. It's it's in the fourth dimension, I think.
Well, and I think it's so, and we think about nurses, right? They've gone to school, they're older, but then we think about these young people, and I guess I was really struck too, Ingrid, if you have something you want to say about the qualitative data, which is really what they're saying, describing their experience. That's what we mean by that. But when they said about the anger and the, wanting to chill, I mean, and that just strikes me about any one of us who've been angry. I certainly have been, and going, God, why didn't I just chill? But if we don't know how to do it, if we don't know how to bring our nervous system to balance, all the talking in the world doesn't stop it. So I don't know if you want to comment, Ingrid, about that.
Well, I think that that's well, our proximal goal is to really keep this in the fabric of the DJJ because if they can learn another way, like this, open this new portal of awareness and it's helpful to them, I think it's a way for their setting to they're interested actually, the teachers, et cetera, to gain control of the behaviors that come from the anger. So like Lindy mentioned, many times we had to reschedule due to a fight breaking out or a riot. So right now, the reinforced behavior amongst the youth is to behave in that way. So how do we shift that? So because it seems like they really maybe want that. They want to chill. They don't want to always react in such a physical or aggressive way because it doesn't benefit them. So how can they control their bodies and react, um,
In a calmer way that
Yes,
doesn't
exactly.
end up causing them harm or others. Yes, go ahead, Lindy.
Yeah, well, one thing, first of all, I absolutely have to give a shout out to Georgia DJJ. They are extraordinary. They do a great job, and they've been very, very supportive of this work. But I think that we need to also say it can't always be the individual kid. We need to think about the institution. How do we make this a systemic?
Change. Right. And I
Yes,
think that's
exactly.
why.
Thank you.
Yeah, we only have a couple minutes left, but I think that's one of the things I want to say to both of you because you did work with a big system and you had to have members of that system saying we want to do some things that could be different. But the other system that you worked with, and I know you did a shout out, Ingrid, to Lindy, because I remember you telling me that you called every one of those parents, Lindy. But that's the family system. And the family system, except for two of 600 said yeah. And then the kids say, I want to share it with my parents. So you see how there's a reciprocal network that can also happen that I think is really important to do a shout out about. But I want to give you each 1 minute each if there's one party word that you want to say. And Ingrid, I'll start with you about anything you want to leave our audience with in a minute.
I just want to say thank you. I hope people are interested in sort of mimicking this approach. We learned so much from the youth. I know that it has potential.
Thank you. And Lindy?
I would say look after your own well-being. Do the iChill app so that you know how to take care of yourself. And also, these kids matter. There are kids in every single country who are getting into trouble. They need help. They're good kids.
Yeah. And I just want to say I think this is an example of how I end every show. What else is true? Yes, these kids did something to get themselves into trouble. They've been incarcerated. But what we've learned is the kids have had a whole truckload full of trauma, most of them had, and that they want to learn skills to be a better person. And so, yes, I mean, some people might say, well, I don't know, maybe you're being too soft. But if we don't create different ways for emotional regulation, mind, body, awareness to help come back into that zone of well-being, to help turn the volume down on the anger, then we're just going to repeat things over and over again. So I want to thank from the bottom of my heart both of you. And also, one more thing, if they want to get in touch with you, you have your website. How do they get in touch with you? Is it resilientgeorgia.com?
Community, it's crimgeorgia.org.
Org.org.
So
crmgeorgia.org.
okay, so CRIM Georgia, CRM Georgia.org. If you go ahead and go to their website, you can get in touch with them and you can learn more. And if you can't, if for some reason you forget, you can also get in touch with me through Resiliency Within, and I will connect you to both Dr. Duva and Dr.
Feel
Grabbe.
free to reach out to us by email.
Okay. So thank you so much, both of you. And until we meet again, remember what else is true. This is Elaine Miller-Karras signing off for Resiliency Within.
Thank you so much for joining us this week for Resiliency Within. Please tune in again next time for another edition featuring your host, Elaine Miller-Karras. We'll talk again soon.